Good day, folks. It's Tony Fortunato from the technology firm. Today we're going to set up a stop capture trigger. We're going to do it with an Akua MGA 2510. Even if you don't have this device, I strongly encourage you to see if your devices have this feature, or if you're out shopping for a packet capture tool, that this feature be in that product as well. So let's jump right into it. Client has a problem. It's intermittent. It's random. This is a very typical scenario. The client's over here, obviously. Servers are over here, a bunch of stuff in the middle. It doesn't matter if the issue is it's dropping or slow. The point is you want to capture the packets. That's the point. So option one, get a comfortable spot beside the client. I always joke in my sessions, bring your lawn chair and your drink, and we just wait for the issue to pop up. When that happens, stop your capture. Alternatively, maybe set up your computer with remote access, and you can stop it remotely, but that brings all sorts of other challenges with it as well. So what's the probability of actually catching this problem? I'm going to say 10%. What's the probability of missing the problem when you go to lunch, home, take a break? Probably 99%, because that's just Murphy's Law, right? Option two, this is the more, I'm going to say, typical scenario. We monitor or span a port, or in this case, get an inline capture device. We ask the client to call or email you when the problem happens. So then you get the trace, you go back through the trace, you try to find the issue. So what's the probability that the client will call you exactly when the problem happens? I'm gonna be a little generous here, 50%. I think it's way less than that, but we'll just say 50%. And then you'll probably have to end up downloading, I don't know, 15, 30 minutes, sometimes an hour from when they did let you know, just to make sure you got it, and hopefully it's still in the buffer. Why? Because you want to be on the safe side and you want to make sure that you've caught the problem. But now you have a huge trace file you have to go through, because in the real world, 30 minutes could be the difference between, like a 100 meg trace and a 1 gig trace. So you want to minimize, stuff that you have to go through. Option three, so that's the same as option two, but we configure the packet capture device with a stop capture trigger. For example, my favorite, just ping the client's computer or have them ping you. Ping anything as long as it's not related to the application or the servers. And that way you know it doesn't get tripped off by accident. Then we set up a desktop or keyboard shortcut on the client computer, and they ping the computer whenever it happens. When the client experiences this problem, they click on their shortcut or use their little hotkey strokes or whatever you want to do, and then the capture stops at that point in time. Layout's pretty typical. We got me over here. I'm in this management port. On the Akua, the management port does not capture packets. I'm not capturing anything. It's got nothing to do with me or my Wireshark, right? And that way, it doesn't matter if I'm capturing from gig, if my card can support that flow. None of that matters. The Akua is doing all the heavy lifting for me. I'm just using this to manage the box, configure the box, and more importantly, pull the trace file down when it's done. So this will be in line between these two switches, and I chose the uplink ports. Why? Because we kept picking different clients for various tests, and I want to make sure that I get them all the time. These switches, one of them was unmanaged, the other one, the span port, had reached its limitations and was in use. So this was the best way to capture the packets in this scenario. Now, the Akua 2510 capture stop trigger has a few things I want to run through that I'm going to say a lot of stop trigger products have as well. So this is well worth watching. In this case, all we have to do to set up a stop trigger is create a filter. That filter is used to stop the capture, period. So the first thing about creating a filter, please make sure you understand ands and ors, otherwise this will never work. In this case, I did ICMP and the IP of my computer. So if that client, or better yet, if the Akua ever sees a ping between the client and myself, either way, it'll stop the capture. I encourage you, whenever you create a filter of any kind for whatever reason, please test it. Don't assume it'll just work. You might do a typo, who knows, right? Especially if you have and ors, then who knows what's going to happen. Just please test it out. From there, we apply this filter as a trigger simply by just checking this box over here. That's it. That's it. And as you can see from this screen, I could have various capture filters, various triggers, so it can get fairly complicated, but let's just keep this simple. Something about stop capture triggers with the Akua that I think is worth bringing up is you have to make sure you understand a few variables about your capture buffer. Now, what about it? Well, in this case, we need to know how big of a buffer do we want. I chose 100 meg, again, just to keep it easy, and 10 files in this example. And then I have to decide in my head ahead of time, where do I want the capture to stop after the trigger happens? Do I want the trigger, the ping packet in this case, to set this trigger off and then immediately stop? Or do I want it in the middle of the buffer? So you have to understand a little bit about the problem, what you want, so you can figure out where you want this to be. In my case, I put it pretty well near the end, just so I can find it easier. So here's another example of when the trigger goes off. This is what you get from the Akua. It's a zip file. Pretty simple. Zip file with a bunch of traces. In this case, these are all 7 meg apiece. The last one's 3. Why? Because the trigger went off, right? So that means that trigger packet should be in that last trace file, you would think, right? But it all depends on that buffer setting that you had a bit earlier. Now, if you want to find that trigger packet, you can look for the ping if you'd like, if you want. The other way to do it even quicker, if you're not quite sure what people used as a trigger later on in life, you could just search for the word trigger in the packet comments. So in Wireshark, you go to Edit, find Packet, and you can just search for the word trigger. The other way to do it is simply display the comments field as a column. And then like you saw down here, it'll pop up and say trigger. Now, if you put packet comments in the trace file, which I always encourage people to do, then this would be helpful to have up as a column anyways. So that's it. I try to keep it short and easy. If you have the ability to use a stop capture trigger, I strongly encourage you to use it. If you don't, you should find ways of setting things up so it can do that. Have a good day. Bye for now.